economist. How can you think like an economist? Okay, so actually economists or scientists as well. Okay, so these economics plays two roles in their day-to-day life. Okay, the first one is scientist. Okay, so as a scientist they're trying to explain to the world what really happening in the field of economics. It's not only in the field of economics, it's also like what happens in the world as general. Okay, and second role they have as a policy advisor. So they're trying to make this world a better place by planning how things can be done effectively and efficiently. Okay, so they act as scientists as well as policy advisors. Okay, so as policy advisors, you can see this all the governments have economists as a as advisors to the president or prime minister according to their government structure. So even we have Dr. Manmohan Singh. He was a great economist who served the Indian government and later become the prime minister. Okay, so excuse me. So let's see how this economist perform as a scientist in the first part of the lecture, and then we look into how they serve as a policy advisors. Okay. So as a scientist, they actually make a lot of assumptions and they work on models. So when you say assumptions, uh, actually we have to, like in data science there's a lot of assumptions. In statistics there's a lot of assumptions that you have to make. Okay, so here in as a scientist, they had made two assumptions. For example, here they had made a lot of assumptions. So here you have to really know about the two assumptions that they have made. Okay, to when you study international trade, they just assume there are only two countries in the world and they only manufacture two goods. That is one. That's a lame assumption that they that they have made, which is completely unrealistic. But still, it gives us a lot of insights about what's really happening. Okay, so the first assumption is there are only two countries in the world, and second assumption is that they produce only two different goods. Okay, and the model actually, and they try to create a model. So everybody like creates model. Biologists have a model, and data scientists, yes, they create a model. But what the models of economists look like? The simple model. They have a lot of models. We're just going to look into two important models, very basic models the economists have. Okay, so a few similar models is like we all have a map, a road map, right? So right now we have Google Maps, and also that's one of the model of the world of Earth, right? And then for a human body, so we have a model for a digestive system separately, for nervous system separately, for muscular system, muscles separately, right? And then study aeronautical engineering, yes, they have to have work on a real plane. Sometimes it's very difficult, so that's why they have a model airplane and then they study on it. Likewise, that's why we have created an assumption of that only two countries and they produce only two different goods. Okay, so based on that we are creating a model as, okay, this is a model for a dentist. Okay. Okay, our first model is a circular flow diagram. So this is a model to visualize our economy, how the currency flows from different markets and among the households and the firms. Okay, so there are like two actors involved here: households and firms. I mean, the organizations, the companies, and the homes. Okay, there are two markets involved here. There's a market for goods and services. I mean, it's a market where the buyers and sellers meet, that market, and there's the other market for factors of production. So what are the factors of production? I'll show you that. Okay, it's labor, land, and capital. Okay, the resources which the companies use to make this product and services. They need people, yes, they need land, as well as they need money. I mean, money, the buildings, the machines, everything. Okay, so how do they get these factors of production? How do the companies get these factors in production? From the people, yes. Yes, it's from a common household. They get laborers to work for them, and they buy land from the common man. From different common men, they buy land, and then they merge together and create a factory, and then they capital, yes, sometimes there are a lot of companies which is kind of bootstrapped and they're working, but there are a lot of companies who go public and they get they distribute their equity shares and get money, right? So even Reliance in the olden days, Dhrubai Ambani, he went public to collect money. Okay, so these are the factors of production. Okay, we have households and firms. Households have people and firms have goods and services. These households own the factors of production. Okay, the labor, money, and the land. So they buy and consume goods and services from these firms. Whereas these firms, they hire the factors of production. They hire labor from these households. They get capital from these households, and they sell these goods and services. So these two things, they create two different markets. Okay, so one is first market is a market for factors of production, where these households supply labor, land, capital to this market for factor of production, and from this market they hire employees, they buy land. So you have a, you can say a market where the employees and employees meet. You can say Naukri, Shine, right? So you just have your skills and then you go and register and and you get hired by this firm. Okay, and then there is stock market where you can just go and invest money within this firm, right? So these are the markets for factors of production. Okay, and these firms pay wages, rent, and profit to this market, and through which the households get income. Yes, it's very true. So these companies pay salary to the employees, and then if they have like got if they have issued equity shares, they have to provide dividends. They have to share their profits with the stock market, with the people who have invested in them, their stocks. So these households get income from them. Okay, so now we have a market for goods and services, where again these buyers and sellers meet, where households spend money and the firms get money. They generate revenue. Here they're selling goods and services. Here, the households are buying goods and services. So this is actually a perfect picture of circular flow diagram. It actually shows how firms and households are connected with each other in through two different markets, through the market of factor of production and through a market of goods and services. Okay, so this is very important to understand economics. Okay, so we have a second model, production possibilities frontier. So it's shortly called as PPF. Here we have a graph which actually shows that there are only two goods. I mean, we had an assumption. Remember, we had the countries produce only two different goods. Okay, with whatever resources they have. Okay, so imagine we have only two goods of wheat and computer. Okay, we have only one resource. We just need labor to make this. Don't think, okay, we need any other resources. It's just an assumption. It's unreal, but still just think about that. Okay, and the labor is measured in hours, not in days. And imagine the economy has only 50,000 labor hours per month. Okay, and you have to like imagine they have to have the same skill set for producing wheat and computers. You have to just think like that. It's just an assumption. I know it's unrealistic, but still you just have to think like that. Okay, so economy has only 50,000 labor hours per month for production. Okay, let's just look into the example here. So to produce one computer, you need 100 hours of labor. But whereas to produce 1 ton of wheat, when you say 1 ton, 1,000 kilograms of wheat, you require 10 hours of labor. Okay, so now we are going to just like allocate hours for computers and wheat, and let's see how the production turns out. Okay, I'm just going to allocate all the 50,000 production hours of labor in computers and nothing in wheat. So let's see how much we get. We get 500 computers and 0 tons of wheat. So without we can't survive, right? We need wheat as well. So I'm just like putting different calculations. I'm allotting 40,000 computers. I mean 40,000 of hours for computers and 10,000 hours for wheat. So I'm just like giving equal hours here. So there's a lot of combinations I'm putting in here, and then I get for B I get 400 computers and 1,000 tons. And for C, for equal amount of production hours, I get 250 computers only. But in wheat, I get 2,500 tons of wheat. Okay, and it goes on. Okay, this can be like visualized through a graph. You get a straight line when you visualize this. Okay, so I have wheat in my y-axis and computers in my x-axis. Okay, so I'm just like plotting A, B, C, D, all the five um, points on the graph. Okay, it gives me a straight line. I hope you are able to like understand how this has been kind of plotted. It's very easy. It's just common sense. Okay, so now we are getting into the different point. So we just had 5 points, A, B, C, D, E. But imagine there's a point F where you can just see it connects to 100 computers and 3,000 tons of wheat. So for this, I think let's check if it is possible or not. Yes, it is possible because it just requires only 40,000 hours of labor. Okay, so here it just requires only 30,000 hours of labor, and for 100 computers it requires 10,000. So it's only 40,000 of labor, but it's possible, but this is not efficient because I'm not using all my resources. I have 50,000 production hours, but I'm not using everything. Okay, so I don't think this is a good point. Okay, the good place for production. Okay, I should not be like producing 100 computers and 3,000 tons. Okay, let's look into the other point. Okay, 300 computers and 3,500 tons of wheat. So let's see if it is possible. So for 300 computers, I need 30,000 hours. And here I should be like looking for 350 hours. Okay. Okay. 30,000 plus again 35,000. So it's actually 65,000 hours of labor. So it's completely not possible because as an economy, we have only 50,000 production hours. So it is not realistic at all. Okay. So we should not be producing 300 computers and 3,500 tons of wheat. Okay. So what we have discussed so far, from the points A to E, it is kind of possible and it is efficient because all the resources are completely fully utilized. Point F, it is possible, but it is not efficient because we are not using all the resources, we are underutilizing things. And the point G, it is not possible because it is unrealistic. Okay. Now we have to like discuss what is an opportunity cost in PPF in relation to PPF. Okay. So so opportunity cost of an item is what we must be given up to obtain that item. Yes, that I think we have discussed this and we have know what it is for previous session. Okay, so it actually allows shifting resources from one good to other good. Okay, so you always have to like face a trade-off. I think you we already discussed about it. To understand to calculate the opportunity cost of one particular good, you have to calculate the slope. I think you all know what is a slope, right? Because it was a straight line, and as even for a not non-linear line, we can able to calculate slope. I think you all know all that already. Okay, so with additional resource, okay, so when there is a growth, when growth is happening, so this line, this curve will shift completely upward. Okay, we should be able to produce more computers and more wheat if there is a growth, or like if there is an improvement in the technology, or if there is an improvement in the production hours. Okay, when everybody got skilled and they can able to produce more goods, or if there is some improvement in the technology where things are automated. So there's always an upward shift. Okay, when things go wrong, when the productivity ours is kind of reduced. For imagine a lot of people are getting retired in the country because the average age is lesser, I mean higher in that particular country, and the production hours goes down. And here it just this graph, this line moves inward. Here it is moving outward because of the growth. Okay, so don't always think that the line will be always a straight line. It can be a curve as well. If if there is a lot of things, I mean, if the economy shifts, or if there's an inclusion of many resources, okay, it can be bow shaped. Okay, so I'm just like here comparing the production of beer with mountain bikes. Okay, so here for example, I'm just showing it as a bow shape, a curve. Okay, so the ppf becomes kind of steeper. Okay, so the opportunity cost of producing mountain bikes is kind of increasing. Okay, the slope gets increasing for the mountain bikes. Okay, so so when it is kind of a curve, it could be of many different reasons. Okay, so when you need different skill sets and then a lot of factors is involved, you will be getting a curve. Okay, and then if there is any other resource, and and it is a mix of resources, we were only discussing about production hours, and when there's a mix of resources, and then it will happen. I think you have studied all this in statistics. When you have a polynomial equation, it happens. Okay, so this we just discussed about two different models, PPF and circle proof, and now we'll be like discussing about microeconomics and macroeconomics. These are the two branches of economics. In the first, you will be like studying about how households and firm interact with each other and how they make decisions. Okay, you'll be like studying about a small environment, okay, a micro environment, only about the firms and households, about a business and how households work with each other. So that is called microeconomics, whereas in macroeconomics you'll be studying about nations economics. You'll be studying about what happens in the world completely. So you'll be like dealing with factors as inflation, gdp, unemployment, economic growth, national income, a lot of other things. Okay, so don't think, okay, these are completely two different subjects. They're interrelated to each other. Yes, inflation will definitely affect households. Unemployment ratios affect households. Economic growth affect firms. Yes, they are related to each other. But when you study a lot of topics in relation to firms and households, you can call that as microeconomics. And if you study more things throughout the economy wide, we can call that as macroeconomics. So we'll be like dealing with both microeconomics and macroeconomics in our sessions. Okay, let's see how economics act as a policy advisor. I've mentioned this already. So every government will, even companies, corporates have economics as a policy advisor for them, working for them, so that they can check what are they doing right and what are the things that has to be done every day. Okay, so these economics make positive statements which describes how the world is working. Okay, so they just like analyze what's really happening in the world and tell us. So all the first two theorems is kind of like that, models were like that. Okay, and sometimes as policy advisors, they make normative statements, which means what you should be doing. Okay, so as a scientist, these people just give us statements which says how the world is working. So you can call that statement as positive statements. But when they tell, okay, what you should be doing, what the government should be doing, what the company should be doing, they are giving normative statements as a policy advisor. Okay, so these are two different statements they make. Okay, when they're a scientist, they make positive statements. When they are a policy advisor, they make normative statements. Okay, so these positive statements can be confirmed because it is based on scientific models, scientific methods. Okay, you have some theory, some math behind it, whereas in the normative statements it is not, it cannot be confirmed because it has not been implemented. Okay, let's see what are the how the normative statements looks like, how the positive statements look like. Okay, I have like 3 or 4 examples describing how it looks. Okay, the first one is like prices rise when the government increase the quantity of money. Okay, so here you're talking about when the price increases only when the government increases more money. I mean, when the government prints more money, the prices increases. I mean, which is related to inflation. Yes, this is a kind of proved. So this is positive statement. Okay, because it describes a relationship. Okay, the second one is the government should print less money. But you can't say this. Okay, so if the government is printing less money, what if people don't have enough money with them? The people will not have enough money. But this kind of statement is not proved. So you can call that as a normative statement. It is not yet been confirmed so far. Okay. And next one is the tax cut is needed to stimulate the economy. It's normative again. Okay. If you state numbers saying okay, this 10% tax cut actually like has led to the growth of economy by 30%. If you say that if it is proven, yes, that is a positive statement because you have been digging more about the past and then you just told us what really happened. So when you do that, that is scientific. That is positive statement. Here you're just like giving us a suggestion of what should be done. So that is normative. An increase in the price of burritos will cause an increase in the consumer demand for video rentals. I mean, this actually looks a little funny, both because I don't think both are related to each other, but still, maybe it's kind of might have been proved. Okay, so you can call this as positive because it describes the relationship. It need not be true, but still it is a positive. Yeah, sometimes these kind of random relationships occur, even it happens in our ML algorithms. Like two different things. You see, there's a lot of correlation between them. They become collinear and all. So it happens. So you can call that as a positive. Okay. Next one is like these economists. They disagree on a lot of areas. Okay. So let's see like why do they do this? Okay. And let's see like on what proposition they are actually disagreeing. Okay. So these people actually like they just like publish what's really been happening in the world, and they also give policy advice, as we know. Okay. And most of the times they don't agree with the other economics point of view. People, they say okay, they always disagree and they always go for arguments and they ask for validation because each of them may have different values and each of them may have different views about what's really happening. Okay, even in India, when a lot of people were I mean, I'm just talking about what happened before demonetization. I think you all know what happened in demonetization, right? So at that time, the Reserve Bank uh, people, I mean, and people who are heading the Reserve Bank of India were completely against demonetization. But still, there are a lot of economists who wanted to bring demonetization so that we can just check out all the black money out of India. Okay, so there were a lot of disagreement in this, but still demonetization happened. Okay, but we are not sure whether it has created any good for us. We are not sure, but we can just like use clean currency. All the currencies are kind of comparatively clean when compared to the olden days. That's one major good thing that happened to India right now. I could say that, but I'm not sure like were they really able to like bring out all the black money. We are not sure about that. Okay, so there's a lot of contradiction happening within India. I mean, with different economic schemes when the demonetization is about to happen. Okay, so because they don't get along each other because of this normative statements. With positive statements, it is scientific. You can prove it, but with normative statements, there's a lot of assumptions behind it, and you can't even say whether it is good or not. I mean, it happens even in data science. You might be having a good accuracy, and you may not sure if that accuracy is the right thing for that problem. Okay, if it is a healthcare problem, we know it should be like around 100%. But for a business problem, is it okay if it is 80%? Can I just in that, if 80% is okay, can I just like give a loan to a person who have a chance of not paying it for 20%? Is it okay? We really don't know. It actually the risk the company is taking, the bank is taking. Likewise, there are risk in a lot of places, and we always have to go with gut feel sometimes. Yeah, with all this predictive techniques available, but things, these kind of things still happening. Okay, so let's see like on what proportions these people actually disagree with each other. Okay, so we have a statement saying a ceiling on rents reduces the quantity and quality of housing available. Yes. So when the government says, I mean, you should not be increasing rents, and then you should not be like renting an apartment for more than 20,000 rupees. So imagine, even if it is a 4 BHK apartment, when you say it's a 4-bedroom apartment with 4 baths, if you are just renting it for 20,000, see, it's a big apartment. You might be renting it for 50,000 or 60,000, but still, when the government says so, a lot of people who's buying and investing in houses and living it for rent will not be doing it. They'll stop doing it. So the quantity will reduce, as well as they will stop maintaining it. So the quality will reduce. Yes. So 93% of the people has agreed with that. Okay. So they said there should not be no there should not be a cap on the rents. Tariffs and import quotas usually reduce central economic welfare. Yeah, that's true, because if you are kind of reducing imports, if you want people to pay a lot of tax when they're importing, yes, in that case they'll not be importing much, which actually like some companies may not be like looking for more projects in that case. So it will actually reduce the economic welfare. So 93% of the time they've agreed with this. And there's one more statement saying United States should not restrict employers from outsourcing work to foreign countries. Come on. Okay, this is a hot topic recently. And I think this statement actually helped Trump to gain office 3.5 years back. And maybe this is the statement which is going to throw him out of office. I'm not sure how Joe and Kamala going to perform, but this statement has a great impact on that. So apart from that, when you just look into the statement, when you say 90% of the economists in US agreed US should not be restricting their employees from outsourcing. If they are starting doing that, imagine a lot of countries who completely rely on outsourcing jobs of US, especially like India, Philippines, Indonesia, and a lot of South Asian companies, even China. So a lot of projects being outsourced to us, to the Asian countries, most of the South Asian countries. Okay, so 90% of the economics is not against outsourcing. And the fourth point would be the United States should eliminate agricultural subsidies. Oh my God, 85% of people agreed with that. I'm not sure like why, but agriculture most of the times needs subsidies, because but when compared to the Indian agriculture system and with the United States, I mean, most of the farmers in the United States have large lands, but in India we have a lot of small farmers. Okay, but right now we have a lot of subsidies in India, but I'm not sure about the subsidy system in US. But economists were completely against the subsidies for agriculture. I'm not sure whether it's good or wrong. But 85% of people agree with this. Okay, so that's all for today. So today we have been discussing about a lot of things. About first, we just started with why economists should be a scientist, and why they should be a policy maker, and what they really do uh, as a policy advisor. Like we talked about positive statements, normative statements, and why do they disagree, and on what proportion. Okay, so actually we actually discussed about two important models, right? The circular flow diagram and PPFs, which is very, very important. Okay, so that's all for today. If you got any questions, you can just ask.